It just exploded, like a whole mountain just exploded in 5 seconds. I've never seen anything like it.
Australians know it as Black Summer. The months in late 2019 and early 2020 when the country saw its most intense bushfire season on record. Up to 3 billion animals were killed or displaced, and huge swathes of their habitat were burned. I'm Nick Lazaridis, and 18 months on, I've been travelling across Australia to discover how its wildlife is faring now.
There's a complete removal of resources that wildlife needs, whether they eat leaves, flowers, pollen, fungi. All those resources, the food stuff of the wildlife, is gone.
But from the ashes of catastrophe, there are also signs of hope and new beginnings for some of Australia's most iconic animals.
Yes, there were some casualties, but there was no species lost, and that is important. And people have to realise that it takes time for a natural habitat to re-establish, for the wildlife to come back to it, but it will happen.
In far northern New South Wales, not far from where Australia's worst bushfire season began in 2019, one of the country's best-known species is struggling under the strain.
So yeah, I'm just looking, because he had an internal bleed and he had a blood transfusion, I'm looking just for fluid in the abdomen, just to make sure that that bleeding has stopped.
Here and in other parts of the country ravaged by the fires, slow-moving koalas stood little chance.
Yeah, koalas are in a tree, so they don't run away from fires, and the fires just sweep through. And if it's a really slow-burning, intense fire, they just get burnt and then they fall to the ground dead.
With huge tracts of their native habitat destroyed, urban development and rampant land clearing has put the species on a fast track to extinction.
But you can see his broken nose there, and he's still a bit wonky on one side.
In New South Wales, the push to protect koalas has been mired in bitter political debate, and weak national environmental laws appear to be hastening their demise.
So it is a concern with politics and the koala recovery plans and things that the government's trying to put in place. It makes us concerned that they're not doing enough to protect these animals, because we do know that they are very vulnerable at this stage due to habitat loss.
This is Triumph. Hey, baby. Hello, darlings. Oh, you want cuddles?
At the Lismore Koala Hospital, one of a handful dedicated solely to koalas, the list of long-term residents is expanding. But this koala, named Triumph, is already famous. So do you have a special bond with this koala?
Absolutely. I've had him since he was a baby.
With part of his leg missing, Triumph was recently fitted with a prosthetic limb, a world first.
Hey, buddy. There you go.
It's a welcome milestone in koala care, but for the frontline teams caring for Australia's iconic wildlife, the trauma of Black Summer looms large.
We're already full with koalas that were suffering. We had record numbers. I think we had at one stage 34 koalas, which is, yeah, we were struggling. So we were already building up runs. And then when the fires hit, unfortunately, we had to wait until it was clear for us to go out. But most of them perished. It did bring a lot of awareness around If only COVID didn't come out shortly after, otherwise we could be still educating people. But yeah, absolutely, there was keen interest all over the world. So in one way, that was good, but it was devastating to our wildlife.
With the recovery of the koala and other native species hampered by weak laws and toxic politics, the most substantive response is coming from the grassroots.
So was your Indigenous protected area affected by the fire?
Yeah,
80% of the property,
80%,
and it was,
and a lot of animal species had moved away too.
We know that over 80% in some areas of the koala habitat has been destroyed and affected by the fires, with over 61,000 koalas estimated to have perished in the fires. So we do know that all the way up the east coast of Australia, there were fires affecting koala habitat, including in this area here.
On this farm in Tintinbar in northern New South Wales, the World Wildlife Fund is helping with a community effort to plant koala food trees on a massive scale.
Even just today, we're planting 9,000 koala food and habitat trees, and the cattle have been removed off this property, and the landholders are really wanting to see this part of the property restored for the koalas.
With more farmers choosing to rehabilitate cleared land, there are hopes that if koalas survive, other wildlife will also thrive.
Koala habitat is also home to a whole range of other species. So when we protect koala habitat, we're protecting habitat for a lot of different species, including a lot of other threatened species like quolls or powerful owls or lyrebirds or lots of different marsupials like platypus. So by supporting koala habitat, we're protecting habitat for a large range of animals.
The Gondwana rainforests of Australia are amongst the oldest on the planet. A World Heritage Site, these cloud forests date to the time of the dinosaurs, when Australia began separating from the ancient supercontinent of Gondwana 99 million years ago. The plants and animals that live here provide us with the best examples of the Earth's stages of evolutionary history that exist.
So we're looking here basically into the very middle of the biggest unburnt expanse of native forest in northern New South Wales.
But in 2020, as flames ravaged at its fringes, precious pockets of its astonishing biodiversity disappeared in a flash.
There were fireballs leaping 50 or maybe 100 metres above the canopy. The whole mountainside alight, the whole sky glowing. It was like watching a volcano erupt. The type of stuff that you look at, it's like that could never burn.
On the Dorrigo Plateau in the New England tablelands of New South Wales, ecologist Mark Graham has been studying the impacts of the Black Summer bushfires in a region he's known intimately for more than 30 years.
Half of the gazetted area of the Gondwana rainforests of Australia burnt between September 2019 and January 2020. That's wiping a global treasure from the landscapes that we're the custodians of. The mortality in these forests has been that great that what all these incredible, these globally significant fauna species need to survive is not there. Dead orchids. It's deathly silent. There's not a single bird calling, and that I'm crying inside at that because I've been coming here since 1981 or 82, and I know deep within my head what these forests should sound like, and they're silent.
As fires swept through from the west, the canopies of some of the state's most treasured national parks were engulfed. More than 18 months later, many of the burnt eucalypts are re-sprouting in a process known as epicormic growth. But in Australia's harsh climate, with more frequent droughts, many will not survive.
There are whole areas where we knew that species such as the sphagnum frog, which is one of our most ancient frogs, have been entirely wiped out because all the leaf litter and all the organic matter in the forest floor and in the soil burnt through. And they lived within these permanently wet soaks in the forest. And they're now gone from areas that we know that they once occurred. And they have lineages going back to Gondwana. So we've lost, in a geological instant, tens of millions of years of biodiversity. That's what's happened on our watch. And that's infinite sadness. These trees would have to be well over 500 years old. Some of them are well over 1,000 years old. These ancient Antarctic beaches. And there are super medicines in the fungi that dwell within these Antarctic beach.
And how was that affected by the fires in some parts?
Totally wiped them out.
Data is emerging that the bushfires of 2020, in the hottest and driest period in Australian history, were on a scale never experienced on this continent. Here on its burnt edges, life will never be the same.
The areas of grey forest visible in the distance are dead, where the crown fire under a 90km/h wind burnt through, and there's been widespread mortality. Eucalypts don't have dormant seeds, so because of the sheer scale, it's highly unlikely that eucalypts will be regenerating or germinating where whole mountainsides are dead below us. So that's effectively ecosystem collapse.
Kangaroo Island's story since the fires is one of extraordinary resilience and recovery. Separated from the mainland 10,000 years ago, it lies just off the coast of South Australia and is the country's third largest island. Scientists say the interaction between plants and animals here provides a biological window into the past, a kind of Noah's Ark of Australian wildlife. But with the island's iron-rich soils a magnet for lightning, the cataclysmic events of Australia's Black Summer conspired against it. Almost half the island, around 200,000 hectares, burned.
So here we're coming up to the area where the fire, you can see where the fire burnt to, just up around here. And then it left these little patches of unburnt vegetation here, so we're like literally right on the edge where the fire stopped.
Kangaroo Island wildlife researcher Pat Hodgins remembers the fear which gripped him in the days which followed.
It was pretty clear to us that the impacts for threatened species on the island was going to be pretty massive. If you see just the fire ripping through the habitat and taking everything away, it's like, you know, a massive habitat loss in a, you know, just like that, like click of a heartbeat, really. The KI Dunnart is pretty distinctive. If it runs along here, in front of this camera trap, the camera will detect the movement and then take a series of photos.
And this was what worried him the most: the fate of the endangered Kangaroo Island Dunnart, a tiny marsupial.
When you have species like the Kangaroo Island Dunnart that is only found here, there are none on mainland Australia, there's none on any other islands, there's none in captivity, and they only live in this really small location. If you have fire that comes through and just takes them all out, or takes out all the habitat, you don't really know how that species is going to respond. So we were obviously pretty concerned that there was going to be some pretty major impacts for that species. There always would have been probably more fire in the
With predators on the prowl, teams worked quickly to create safe havens for any remaining ground species, setting up simple contraptions like these netted tunnels where animals could hide. Nearby, drift nets were placed with cameras attached to help identify anything moving on the surface.
Within a couple of days, miraculously, we had found Kangaroo Island dunnarts that had persisted here, which was fantastic, and also a whole host of other threatened species like southern brown bandicoots, which are endangered, southern emu wrens and western whitbirds. So that was amazing to know that they'd persisted in this location.
With that tiny success, a rescue plan was hatched to secure remaining populations, and within months, the Western River Refuge was created. Almost 400 hectares of habitat protected with a cat exclusion fence that ecologists hope will become a sanctuary for the dunnart and other species.
Because of that effort and because of the funding and the resources that have gone into the Kangaroo Island dunnart, we know more about the dunnart now than we ever have because of the bushfire, which I guess is a bit of a silver lining. And what we have seen from that is that we found dunnarts in a lot more locations than we previously have.
And it's not just dunnarts which have survived.
This is a possum, a brush-tailed possum.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very, very nice to sort of see these guys. They're burrowing down and sort of survived or moved along in different areas. Tiny little pygmy possums, which you would never think would be able to survive such an intense fire.
In the aftermath of the fires, anything that managed to survive the inferno faced a new threat on the charred landscape: feral cats. With so many species already pushed to the brink, a battle is now underway to remove them from the fragile environment.
So it looks like quite a contraption. They are a snap trap, so a cat will put its paw inside of it, it'll snap shut and we'll hold the cat there, and then we come out basically at sunrise, the earliest time, and euthanize the cat. It's great that they can hold a feral cat and not damage our native wildlife.
At the far end of the island, untouched by the fires of Black Summer, wildlife is flourishing.
This is a map of Kangaroo Island showing where the fires occurred this last year, and the colours also show you the intensity of the fire in a lot of area. So the west end of the island, you can see there was some very, very intense burns, but there were also some areas that didn't burn, so there were some refuges for the wildlife to escape some of this. Here we go, echidnas. Echidnas are coming.
Dr. Peggy Rismiller has been studying the wildlife of Kangaroo Island for more than 35 years, with a particular focus. The island's largest natural predator, the Rosenberg's goanna, which can live several decades. And the short-beaked echidna, an egg-laying creature that's the world's oldest surviving mammal.
Everyone loves echidnas, and echidnas are really good in the environment. Both echidnas and goannas are one of our natural gardeners. So they're very, very good. They're both diggers. That means they're cultivating the soil, they're turning over the soil, and they're helping the natural environment actually spread.
Just days after the worst fires in living memory reduced much of the island's bushland to ash, Dr. Rismiller discovered the first vital signs of recovery.
Immediately after the fire, we still found invertebrate life. We still found the ants, we found the termites, we found the spiders. All of those were also food sources for other things. There were areas of refuges, areas that didn't burn, where animals did take refuge in. So that meant that there was areas that we have populations that are able to expand as the environment itself starts to expand. The whole chemical powerhouse of the environment has changed post-fire. So after the fires, some of the first thing we saw were these amazing fungus that have come up, because with all of the ash, it has to change, the pH has to change before other things can start to grow. And it's actually one step after another is the way that nature does it. But that's not the way that humans usually think. You know, we want things to happen. We want things to happen much quicker than nature does. So nature's time is definitely different than people time. Watch your head.
Like elsewhere in Australia, plant and animal species on Kangaroo Island have evolved with fire. And although the intensity of the Black Summer bushfires were off the charts, renewal of the environment is already underway.
You can say that the termite mound is actually covered with a type of soil or dirt. And what we found out is that the termites will actually mine certain chemicals from the soil and build that into the top of their mound, and that actually makes their mounds more fire resistant. So in some places with the bushfire, the mounds look totally intact. You can see them with everything black and burned around them, and the mound is standing there looking like it wasn't touched. I think if you're a scientist and a biologist, you have to be positive about these things. You're looking at species such as the echidna that was around 120 million years ago. Now, Australia has gone through ice ages, they've gone through greenhouse effects, they've gone through probably a number of catastrophic fires in that time, and echidnas are still considered one of Australia's most common native mammals. So they are really true survivors, and it's the true survivors we should look at, and we should perhaps try to model ourselves a little bit about them, about being survivors ourselves. They're resilient, the ecosystems are resilient, Kangaroo Island people are resilient.
Australia is still assessing the scale of the immense damage done by its Black Summer. But the resilience of Kangaroo Island could hold the key to protecting the nation's rich biodiversity from future catastrophic fires. As public attitudes to climate change begin to shift, there's renewed hope that Australia's remarkable wildlife will be given a fighting chance.